It is Friday. It is cloudy, but keep in mind that those clouds will eventually clear and then we will have sunshine. I sound like a politician. Gosh, I never want to do that. 7 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story, and I thank you for joining us this morning. 63, looking for a high probably today. Well, depending on how long the clouds stick around, might not get out of the 70s. I'm not going to complain about that. I'm most comfortable when the temperature is at 75. Anything above that makes me feel as if I need a shower 24/7. Some people would say that anyway. Uh, some of the things coming up this morning that I'm going to be mentioning in about an hour, we'll be joined by Pastor Shahram Hadian, and he is going to be speaking in Twin Falls at a number of events next week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. He's coming here from the state of Washington. He is a native of Iran, grew up in a Muslim family, although apparently not too terribly devout. They fled the Iranian Revolution and came to this country when he was a little boy in the late 1970s. He is scheduled to join us because he is going to be issuing a warning about the dangers of radical Islam. On the air with us today, as well as while he is here next week. Also coming up in a few short minutes, we'll spend a little bit of time with the Twin Falls Senior Center. We have the director coming in, Jeanette Rowe. She's going to be talking with us about some of the needs at the Senior Center. They always have needs, believe me. They are always looking for volunteers. They are always looking for people who can help out with various projects. So those things are coming up in a short while, but I wanted to open the show today and share a couple of thoughts about one of our U.S. senators who yesterday impressed me. Jim Risch has never been on this program. We have had Mike Crapo in studio with us, but we've never seen Jim Risch in the studio nor on the telephone. And after the vote on the Pacific trade deal, I've had my doubts about this guy's commitment to the actual people of this state. Now, they voted, I give them a little slack. They voted because they were thinking we're going to sell a lot of produce overseas. And from the standpoint of Idaho being an agricultural producer, I can understand what they may have been thinking, but in the long run, I don't think that deal's good for the country. But if I agreed with someone 100% in politics, I'm not sure I ever have. Ever. And if you really want someone who reflects your views in public office, then go ahead and run. Because that's probably the only way you'll be happiest with yourself if you're in elective office. And right now, you're not going to find many people you agree with on every item. You'll have someone who you agree with on a majority of items. Yesterday, I think that Jim Risch distinguished himself while he was questioning U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry during a hearing. This took place in the U.S. Senate yesterday, Foreign Relations Committee, and there are grave doubts about the Iranian deal that Kerry negotiated, and Kerry's even admitted that, well, he's got amnesia now, that some of the things that were promised are not there, and he's admitted he did not read the side deals. This guy is making policy with a country that still is screaming death to America. Jim Risch offering some of his own thoughts, and he's taking a very blunt tone. For a man who seems very level at times when he speaks, he was a little heated yesterday.
You know, we've gone from the mantra of no deal's better than a bad deal, and I've heard everybody say that a few weeks ago, and now we've gotten to the point where, well, you have to accept this or else it's war. The mantra has changed dramatically, and all I can say is after reviewing this, even in a cursory fashion, anyone who believes this is a good deal really joins the ranks of the most naive people on the face of the earth.
You don't normally get such language, naive people on the face of the earth, but it got worse. I mean, he wasn't done. And in fact, he went on to say that in his view, we've been told a pack of lies.
If we don't go along with this, we're told, the other negotiators are going to go along with this, and the United States will be isolated on this issue, and we will be the pariah on the national stage. Now, just think about that. Where these negotiations have taken us from a situation where we had Iran exactly where we wanted them to now, if we don't go along with this, then we are going to be the isolated and pariah character on the national stage.
Isn't that, though, how the Obama White House and all of the people who work for it, how they feel? They don't like the United States. I mean, they start from a position of hating America, self-loathing liberals. John Kerry, Barack Obama, they claim that this country is not exceptional. And in Mr. Obama's case, seems to have, how shall we put it, a deep-rooted love of Islamic radicals. I'm sorry to say that, but he won't criticize them. He grew up amongst some of them. So why would he see this in his viewpoint, we're the enemy? John Kerry is carrying out the policy. Jim Risch, though, is getting a little bit worked up.
Let me tell you the worst thing about Parchin. What you guys agreed to was we can't even take samples there. IAEA can't take samples there. They're going to be able to test by themselves.
Remember, Mr. Obama had pledged, as he was trying to sell this deal for months and months and months, that we were going to be able to have inspections anytime, anywhere. Well, that's not part of the deal. And now he and both Mr. Kerry are saying, well, they don't recall ever saying that. They're on videotape. We can show you that. They're the quotes in the newspapers, but no, they have no recollection of ever making any sort of promise. And with that, Senator Risch looked directly at John Kerry and said, you got snookered.
To be able to walk away from this and say that this is a good deal is ludicrous. With all due respect, you guys have been bamboozled, and the American people are going to pay for that.
John Kerry, by the way, had his own reaction. Yes, he did. He was not happy with the criticism, and then he just went on to deny and obfuscate, and was a mess yesterday. An absolute mess. Obviously, when he slammed his head after falling off his bicycle, something has gone even more haywire than it already was. It's 8:13. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. Senator Risch's office has answered a question that came up on the air yesterday. A caller said, I do not believe the United States taxpayer is on the hook for it's $50 billion. They've reduced that money now. It was going to be $150 billion at one point, $50 billion that has been promised to Iran. That money, and the caller, I think, was talking about this, and Risch's office does concur, is spot on in saying that this were assets of the Iranian government that were frozen in this country, and that those are going to be returned as part of the deal. Now, if you look at that, though, there were a great many people who said that those assets should have gone to compensate the Americans who were held hostage by the Iranian terrorists back in the late 1970s and through the 1980 election and then up to Inauguration Day in 1981. And that was money that may have been owed to these people legally, and that we should have just sat upon that and said, hey, tough. You violated international law, and now you're going to pay the price for it. But yes, we are turning around, giving them the stack of money, which they can now use to obviously fund more terrorist efforts around the world, which they have been doing for 35 years. I do want to point out, if you'd like to reach our program today, you can give me a shout, 736-0300. That is 736-0300. What's happened in the last few days, interestingly enough, you have a lot of folks at the New York Times and the Washington Post. Thomas Friedman at the New York Times had been trying to sell this the last couple of weeks as being a great deal and will prevent war, etc. But with all of these details coming out, all of a sudden the usual suspects in the fellow traveling media are going silent as well. John Podhoretz, who writes it from a more right-of-center perspective at the New York Post, says today the deal is dead, that it is not going to go beyond where it already has, and that is, the stamp of approval at the United Nations, where, along with Mr. Obama and John Kerry, they don't much care for the United States either, only when they can actually, feed at our trough, which the United Nations has been doing since 1945. Over at the Washington Times, the retired editor of that newspaper, Wesley Pruden, headlined, "The Mullahs rub some noses in Obama's folly." Like many Muslims, he says the Iranians know very little of the world beyond the mosque and figure that if an agreement satisfies the mullahs, it should satisfy everyone, praise be to Allah, even the president of the nation they call the Great Satan. Why should the president need help selling an agreement that guarantees an Islamic bomb? Rub the noses of the infidels in the grime of the Islamic celebration. He says the kindest thing anyone can say about the performance of the White House is that it was fleeced. Yeah, and yet we keep being told this is going to be good for us. How can the possibility of another nuclear power that simply just reiterates constantly over the weekend, this past weekend, and we told you about this the other day, the leading mullah in that country had a rally and they all shouted death to America and death to Israel. And John Kerry says, "Oh, I'm deeply disturbed by that kind of language." You're deeply disturbed? Holy moly. They're threatening us on a daily basis, and we're saying, well, go ahead and build a nuclear weapon. If you take out a couple of our cities, we'll let bygones be bygones. Lieutenant Colonel Alan West spoke at a rally a couple of days ago at Times Square in New York City. I do not have time to play the entire address. It's about 7 minutes long. Depending on what version of it you look at on YouTube, one of them already had 250,000 views this morning. And then there are multiple other versions people were filming from various angles at the stage, so it's likely surpassed 500,000 page views already. But he read the Riot Act. 22 years in the U.S. military, serving as an officer. He read the Riot Act over this and about the Obama administration. And yet what's interesting is I happened to see some of the online comments today. Now, you realize a lot of these people who are on the internet and who are actually doing the commenting, they're not working, which means they're likely Democrats. And what they're doing is they're under instructions from the Democrat National Committee to actually, this is true, they actually have a squad that runs this. They go online and they offer all of these comments. Oftentimes they're not very bright, but they offer all of these comments in defense of the White House and just railing against anyone who criticizes what's going on. And somebody said this morning, I saw one of the comments, that Alan West was nuts. Why is it nuts to love your country? Why is it nuts to say, hey, this is a raw deal? Why is it nuts to say we need to support Israel and we need to prevent these guys, these bad guys, from developing the ability to wipe out entire countries? That's considered crazy any longer? What the heck is wrong with that? If you get a chance, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to take an opportunity, and I'd like you to look up Alan West on YouTube. YouTube has a number of functions there, and some of those you can actually select by day and by week, and so you can narrow the search down, because there are videos of Alan West going back 6 years. Some of them, I should say, where he is giving some very dramatic addresses. One of those from 2009, very similar to his rhetoric a couple of nights ago at Times Square. But if you go there, you've got to take a look at that speech. I have actually posted a link to it. If you go to our Facebook page, newsradio1310.com Facebook page, and you check it out, you're going to find I have a post there from yesterday's show where I'm talking about some of these issues, one of our own videos. But what I have done in the comments section is I have posted that video from Colonel West. So if that simplifies it for you, but I'll tell you right now, a simple Google search should turn up this speech near the top of the page. If you're afraid of Google, there are a number of other sources you can use as a search agent. Some of them, of course, are in place in order to try and prevent people from knowing each and every detail about your life. Google has a tendency to be a little nosy and might be working in cahoots with some people in the government who may not like you. I'll pass that along. But you've got to take a look at that today if you get a chance. It's some of the most stirring rhetoric I've heard in American politics in probably, since the age of Reagan. We're coming up on 20 minutes after 8. We have a guest joining us in just a few, 3 or 4 minutes from the Twin Falls Senior Center. We're going to be talking about some needs they have. That's on the way. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 20 minutes after 8 o'clock.